Lowe's knows when you're looking for reliability, the right brand makes all the difference. And now, Lowe's is the exclusive home improvement retailer for the Whirlpool water treatment line, including their Wi-Fi softener, under-sink filtration system, and more. With Whirlpool's proven performance and our everyday low prices, better tasting, better quality water is within reach. Shop pro-trusted brands like Whirlpool and more, in-store or online. Lowe's, we help, you save.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us again on the Seafood Matters podcast. You can help me by pressing subscribe and share it with family and friends. In this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Elena Balestri, Senior Fisheries Policy and Science Manager at the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, known as the SFF. Hi Elena.
Hello Jim, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Before we get going, for the benefit of our listeners, can you walk us through your background, the path that brought you to the SFF, and the role you play now?
Yes, Jim, thanks. So, to start with my background, I have studied at the Faculty of Biological Studies at the University of Rome, La Sapienza. Its works there is quite different from here. You start with a very generic background and subjects, your math and chemistry and physics, human physiology even, to then narrow it down while you progress. I took an interest in zoology, botany, ecology, and discovered marine biology, oceanography, and algology. And so I landed on my marine background. After finish the university, I just wanted to go into research and keep studying for the rest of my life. But just let's say that Italy wasn't and probably isn't the land of meritocracy and opportunities. So I just found a job at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, commonly known as FAO. And I ended up working there for 12 years. I worked at the interface between data and information systems and dissemination, with focus, of course, on marine resources and fisheries. My focus at that time was worldwide, very high level, let's say. I was a member of the Secretariat of the Fishery and Resource Monitoring System, known as FIRMS, which is a partnership aiming to provide access to information on fisheries and resources worldwide via the creation of inventories on the matter. After 12 years, due to my nationality, it's a long story, so I'm not going to go there, I felt I kind of hit the glass ceiling and decided to move and look for another job. I always loved Scotland and decided to apply for a position with the fishing industry. I started on a project on discards and the famous or infamous landing obligation with the producers' organizations to then land a job at the Scottish Fishermen's Federation. This leads me to the job that I have now, my daily job, which is as you said, as a senior fishery policy and science manager. I have to deal with matter of conservation and science and the interaction with renewable and so many other things. Everything is science related that might interact or interfere with fishing. I'm there to bridge the gaps and translate the language and facilitate conversations between fishermen, the fishermen that I represent, and the policymakers and the government, the academia and research institutes. At times, I try to mediate with the NGOs as well. Not that I have had much success on the matter so far, though.
There's definitely a story going on from that comment.
Yes, there is. I guess we get in the details later on.
On the Attenborough Oceans film, what was your gut reaction when you saw the Attenborough piece calling for a full-on ban on bottom trawling?
So I'll start to say that I went to see the movie as a during working hours as a piece of work I had to do. I was planning to take notes during the movie, but then in the dark, it's proved to be quite difficult. I have to admit that at first I was quite irritated, actually, by even from the opening claims about this mystification of the sea and the extent of the unknown around the sea and its creatures, habitats, movements, and so on and so forth. I felt that there is a lot that actually we know about the sea and is accessible to whomever actually wants really to know more about it. It's all about applying and wanting to know. There is a lot of unknown, of course, but assuming that nobody knows anything about it, as it seems to imply, it really irritated me at the beginning. I mean, there are scientists that spent years, a lifetime studying it, and people working on it. Considering that there is still a bit of unknown, we should talk and disseminate real information. And maybe we should also use the knowledge that comes from the users of the sea, as I said before. I have to say that after the first irritation, it only got worse during the movie. It was a crescendo of emotions triggered by me trying to look at the movie as if I knew nothing about what it was portrayed and talked about. So I ended up at the end of the movie very, very bitter about it.
That's understandable. Because you obviously knew the consequences.
Yeah, somehow I knew and I feared it. It was very, very easy to understand at that point that the path ahead of us would have been quite difficult.
Do you feel they are trying to ban something they don't understand?
I really do. But even more upsetting, I think they're trying to ban something by selling an oversimplistic idea of what it is. It's not that they don't understand it, but they are selling it in a wrong way more than anything. I feel that after watching this movie or the Stephen Fry ad or the propaganda that is ongoing on social media, people will just think that they know enough. And whatever is presented to them is done in such a matter-of-fact kind of way that will not leave any space for questions or for thinking, oh, maybe I should look more into this. I should maybe try to understand. But the way that is presented is so factual that actually will not leave the space for that. The problem is that we need to move into a space where, despite things look ugly, they might be necessary, and we should be trying to ask ourselves questions and trying to inform ourselves on what it is that we are looking at. Even certain things that might look ugly, they need to be understood, they need to be managed, and they need to be better as well. But it is also actually I'm going to bring this up because it was funny for me after working at FAO so many years and after reading of various methods of fishing around the world. It was funny to me looking at the footage of the movie and see this idyllic presentation of these fishermen along the coast of Liberia, I think they were, using a beach seine, and that was portrayed as a with the colors and the music as a nice thing to do. But then if you really look into that, that fishing method is a beach seine, and beach seining has been banned in several countries because it was deemed unsustainable. So I'm not saying that that's the case because I don't want to do the same mistake. I'm saying that possibly is a method to be monitored and looked at. but I'm also saying that they try to present something that is not what it looks like.
I think from the sound of you, Elena, you're on the same mind as Professor Ray Hilburn at the University of Washington, and he classes a classic of, MPA is really a classic of unforeseen consequences. They are a simplistic diversion from the more complex but essential task of managing fisheries better.
Yes, indeed. Ray is it's an authority in his field, and of course, I do agree with this. There is, but we also have to say that there is a lot of managing going on. Fisheries, in certain areas of the world, but especially up here in the North Atlantic area, is one of the most regulated and well managed activities. So we need to also recognize the evolution of the fisheries management and how we have reached a space where fisheries management is actually in a good place. Of course, it can be better. Everything can be better through times, but we need to acknowledge where we are as well.
The film was launched with royalty, celebrities, and the big NGOs, yet the very people most affected, who hold the most knowledge and experience, fishermen and fisheries scientists, were left out. Do you know why?
Well, the launch of the movie was not random or casual at all. It has been in the making for a while, and the release has been perfectly timed to influence the UN Ocean Conference in Nice. It is without a doubt a piece of propaganda sold as a documentary and needed to be launched with a big splash by big and important people. It is all very mediatically powerful. They didn't need some constructive input from a fisherman or a fishery expert or any sense check for what matters, because it would not have served the purpose of the movie.
Yeah. Fishermen ask, I'm sure you talk to them yourself, your members, they ask the question, would a film about farming with no farmers be accepted? And so why a film about fishing without fishermen?
Well, the makers of the movie would tell you that there were fishermen in the movie. There were these small-scale artisanal fishermen off the coast of Liberia or wherever they were with these questionable fishing methods, as we said before. Yet, whenever they decided to focus on fishing in the movies and show trolling or dredging, they made very clear that they were keeping away from the human touch. They never show fishermen. They only showed the ugly, bad machines with this whole different music, different lights, different sound, this sudden silence, and then followed by a big bang, just to make it look worse than it is. The technique used in the movie, they were quite simple, I would say, but extremely powerful. There was this creation of a before and after effect by presenting a colorful coral reef from a tropical or equatorial place, and then suddenly a fishing ground in Scotland that might have been fished for hundreds of years, and it made it look like it's a before and after the effect of fishing. And this is extremely devious, I would say, but it's effective and it served the purpose of the movie. Indeed, so the what is lost there is the fact that fishing is one of the most important ways of feeding the world, and is not just lost, it's very much well hidden.
Okay. Could the public be misled by emotionally charged narrative?
So, first of all, that might be me not being a mother tongue here, but I would not use the term misled. In my mind, misled is a bit too passive to cover what is happening here. Misled, in my mind, is something that is a byproduct of a message that might lead people in a bad direction. In this case, I really think that the public was led exactly where they wanted, to the narrative that fishing is bad. There is even they go so far to make a connection between saving the world and stop fishing. So it's not misleading by mistake. This is actually driving and leading the public to think what they want them to think.
So you feel they might want to save the world, but they certainly won't feed it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a longer conversation possibly, and it's about wanting to shut down certain things, not having clever alternatives for it. We need to make peace with the fact that we have an impact. Anything we do, we'll talk about it more. We'll talk more about it later in the interview, I think. But yes, I feel that in this case, the message is emotional and it's easy. It doesn't leave any space for reasonable doubt and does not invite to try and know more on what is presented. I mean, and asking question, triggering curiosity should be at the basis of any pretended scientific documentary. This is where they have to leave you. They have to leave you there with more questions and the need to know more about things. And this is not what the movie does.
Yep, I understand. Is the film, would you say, eco-propaganda? Is there a risk in celebrity-driven environmentalism?
Well, yes, celebrities, they have to recognize the fact that they might have a bigger impact than anybody else speaking on the matter. So the power that they have in delivering certain messages needs to be weighted with the necessity for them to take on board more than one voice and trying to understand better and engage with people to try and understand deeply what they're talking about and not just base their taking a position or another on a partial information on the subject.
Do high-profile documentaries have a duty to show balanced science, or is good photography and clever storytelling enough to shape public opinion?
As I said, I feel that good photography and clever storytelling is enough, but it really shouldn't. We are living in a society, and sorry if I get a bit more philosophical here than scientific, but we are living in a society more and more oriented and tuned to fast learning. Critical thinking becomes unnecessary when one or more authoritative figures provide you with something easy and fast to digest. I think a pretended documentary like this one is actually extremely dangerous because it moves away from having a narrator who has an external point of view and shift into a space where someone is simply telling us what we should or shouldn't be thinking. I remember growing up, I was watching documentaries. Of course, I always been interested in nature and science, and you see these documentaries where 100% of the time there is a lion, then eats some other creatures in wherever they are, and I was asking the question, on why the people that were filming that lion doing that such a gruesome thing, they wouldn't stop him. And and the narrator, I remember the voice of the narrator in the documentaries that would say that despite that looked very bad, they were there to show what was happening in nature and not to interfere with it. So I think at this point, I mean, we shifted away from that external point of view of just observing and reporting what's happening. And the the documentary in this way become more and more piece of propaganda. Yes.
Well, Sir David, when you've got the voice of God on a global platform, half a story can be damaging.
Yes, even a quarter of a story can be damaging if it's told with on a very powerful voice.
Sir David is no, we don't see him as a villain, but he's telling a half story. When you've got the voice of God on a global platform, can half a story do real damage?
Well, Jim, I might not be as kind as you are here, frankly speaking. I'm usually not very impressed by celebrities, and I did not grow up in this country, so for me, it's just a person telling a story, really. So I'm not really joining the national treasure narrative here, and maybe that gives me a bit more an external point of view, which I don't think it's unhelpful. I think that even him will have to live with the consequence of what he says and what is decided to portray. I do respect his beliefs, but I'm very disappointed by the lack of capacity in delivering a fair and balanced picture. He has come on board with a project. This is a project to ban bottom trolling. This is a project of is a propaganda piece that makes fishing look bad. He has accepted to be fed information from certain sources, and by getting on board with these, he's made an active choice. So we need to accept that people might think is the villain of the story at this point, might as well others will think he's the hero. So, but uh, to be frank, I'm not keen to say I like him very much in this moment. And even the other, I mean, I used to have I used to like a lot Stephen Fry because it was one of the QI was one of the things I watched on TV when I came to the UK because it was informing me and it was nice voice, nice accent. I was trying to get my my English in a better place. I don't think I've succeeded, but what is done and the way it's presented is ad on bottom trolling. I think it's even more dangerous than how ocean has been portrayed. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's a much faster delivery of a very complex matter.
Yeah, very much agree on that. Why the selective focus? Ocean singles out bottom trawling, but says nothing about other, even more damaging fishing methods, aggregate dredging, seabed mining, offshore wind, and industrial cabling.
Well, I mean, I guess this tells you all you need to know here, Jim. The fact that it singles out one things only is because the agenda of this movie is to do that. I mean, a lot of money have been invested in this movie, so it is in this movie. So it's clear, and it's they have invested a lot of time and money in in trying to achieve a goal that has nothing to do with teaching or disseminating or disseminating science to the masses. They want um, they want to deliver a specific message as a focus attack on something because that what it's what the agenda is about. I mean, The narrative of, for example, offshore wind that might have an impact on the oceans, which might be worse than fishing, wouldn't sell a ticket in the theaters because offshore wind is seen as the savior of the world. So whatever they might actually do, it's not going to be sold in a bad way. Fishing in this case is a bit of an easy target.
Yep. I have to say, I'm quite sure there's plenty of your members agree with your description that you don't see Sir David as a national treasure, and he's not in the eyes of fishermen in their oilskins on the deck of a fishing boat. He's seen as just another campaigner. So this film is viewed like a torpedo under the waterline of an industry already under siege.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I've been working for the fishing industry in Scotland for just over 10 years now. And I came from a job, as I said, uh, which involved looking at fisheries matters worldwide. In this year, I've seen the campaigning, which is increased and increased, and sometimes even policy becoming more and more similar to a witch hunt, I would say. I'm not surprised that people has had enough of risking their skin in this increasingly hostile landscape. We have lost sight of what fishermen are doing and why they're doing it. They have become just an easy target, the villain in the movie, and not people that are actually facing the most hostile environment in the world to bring back fish for people to eat. This has been lost. It looks like they're there just for destroying the oceans and moving about with the boats. So the layer of how they are instrumental to food security has been lost, and the respect for the lifestyle that they have. I'm sorry, but I also don't get on board with the narrative that we should stop eating fish either. Not only because it's a view that does not account for the environmental cost of alternative source of food, but also because it's very arrogant and entitled view of those people that actually have an alternative and can afford to be picky and principled. There are people in the world that cannot do that, and we cannot forget that fishing is one of the most important way of feeding these people.
I would just say there, Elena, please don't feel you need to say sorry because I'm asking you a question and I want your answer, not how. Not, so you don't have to apologize for what you feel. That's exactly what I want to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Is there enough public understanding of how regulated UK fishing actually is?
I don't think there is. And this is extremely risky when we find in the space where these very well regulated fisheries are under threat of being shut down at the end of the day and replaced by other food production systems that might be less sustainable, or we decide, for example, to destroy the industry in this country where fishery is extremely well regulated, and we end up exporting the problem by importing fish, for example, for other places where fisheries management might not be as good as here. I find this extremely hypocritical.
What examples have you seen of meaningful change in the UK fisheries?
Well, as I said, I've been in the country for 10 years, which possibly is not a huge amount of time to detect discrete jumps and big changes. But in all fairness, I don't think we need these discrete jumps. And I think that a lot of changes and innovation are subtle, and that the fishing sector organically evolves toward a more and more sustainable way of operating. We can't forget that the existence of the industry depends on the long term availability of the resources that they are exploiting. Once we have understood these, it is easy to understand that fishermen are the better custodian of the sea. But going back to changes, I guess that I have noticed a change on how fishing is depicted and how fishing is perceived by people. Sometimes in a very, very unhelpful way, I would say.
In a previous podcast, I had an ICES scientist based in Holland who actually told me they were putting some other people out with fishing boats, and they had their own boats as well. And she states that she thought the fishermen that they work with, their information was better for them than their own scientists.
Yes, I believe that. So there is this newly discovered interest for what the knowledge of fishermen is. The problem is that often it's very difficult to integrate the knowledge of fishermen with the normal Western science, let's say, because it's extremely organized and quantitative and so on and so forth. But I feel that the knowledge of the fishermen is invaluable when you have to provide an interpretation of the data that you receive. This kind of background of knowledge helps you to look at the results of any models and sense check it and see if it actually is believable or not. So it does have an extremely valuable use. It can be used at any time, not even, it doesn't even need to be standardized or anything. You just listen and bring the people with the knowledge in the room.
Do you feel progress in fishing doesn't get the same coverage as problems?
Well, I mean, a bad news makes the news faster than a good news, and that's what it is. So I guess this is a bit related to what I just said about the fact that the industry evolves gradually, and this is not often flashy enough to make the news. Problems, if they are real or they are pretended or they are invented, they are always much more appealable for being divulged and pushed. On top of that, there is an active attempt to broadcast and emphasize problems. I mean, certain entities, they have to focus on problem. They have to keep alive the narrative that there is a problem. Otherwise, I would say they cannot pay their bills. Their purpose isn't served. It's also, maybe we should say that even us working for the fishing industry, we are not very good at broadcasting success. And this is not for the lack of trying, because, but it's a bit down to the fact that we are so overwhelmed of what is happening around us that we are constantly firefighting, and we cannot find a moment where we are actually, constructively looking around and start to talk about the positive things that are happening.
The fisheries scientist from Newcastle University, Magnus Johnson, once in a podcast described that a lie is halfway around the world before the truth gets its boots on.
Yes, and it is also true that once a lie is out, whatever you can do to right the wrong, it comes out as a defense.
Yeah.
So you're always on the back foot with that.
Yeah. With Attenborough having power and the fishing sector none, do you feel this is a fair fight or environmental bullying? Many see the industry as an easy target.
Yes, I mean, the industry is an easy target. I mean, at the end of the day, even if you compare it to farming, let's make an example. What you see about farming is this nice green fields with these beautiful cows on them. You never see the slaughtering house. When it comes to fishing, You don't see underwater. You don't see that these animals are actually living their best life until the moment they're caught. The only thing you see is the boat. So the only thing you really see is the moment that they are caught and slaughtered. So that makes it a very easy target. A lot, though, is also due to the fact that talking about fishing and its complexity is boring. It's very boring. And I'm saying it myself that I spend my life talking about it. It's almost impossible to provide a snappy comeback to any easy headline. Nothing is straightforward when in fishing, and every time we try to deliver that complexity, we end up losing the attention of the audience because it's boring, because it's complex. Attenborough, on his side, has a lifelong career, but the entity they have created the movie have a huge amount of money. They have a huge public at their disposal, and also they are in a better position than us because they don't need to prove what they are saying. They just put out a message and then they wait for people to get behind it. For us, it's much more difficult because we have to take the message and try to explain with 100, 200 words why it's not the right thing to think.
Would you support a blanket ban on all forms of trawling in all UK MPAs? Yes or no? And what's the reasoning behind your position?
So I would say that whenever I see something that starts with a blanket measure, a blanket ban, I am not on board with it. And that goes back to the idea that nothing is so easy and nothing is black and white, and there is never a silver bullet for any problem. We have to remember that MPAs are areas designated to protect features. First of all, not all the features are vulnerable to bottom trawling, and if they aren't, a ban on bottom trawling is not going to protect them. Secondly, if a feature is vulnerable to trawling, it might not be spread evenly or at all over the whole area designated as an MPA. So why don't focus on creating a zonation of the site that will allow the coexistence between protection and sustainable use?
And what about alternatives to bans, MPAs, seasonal closures, gear innovation?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, zonation would be my first thought, but of course, innovation. I mean, we have to understand that, as I said before, fishing methods tend to evolve and become more and more selective and less heavy on the ground. It might be to avoid drag and saving on fuel, but the result is still that they are less impactful on the bottom of the sea. The innovation that have been achieved in the twine of the gears and the mesh size and the square mesh panel added to avoid to improve selectivity and so on and so forth. They are all things that help the fishing method to become more and more sustainable. Of course, we need to be careful there when we speak about innovation and we speak about changing things, that we don't go to the point where we change so much that the fishing method isn't effective and isn't economically valuable anymore, because there will be a point where there is no point in going fishing because the cost might be bigger than the revenue, and at that point there is really no point for going and catching fish for the people that are doing it. So we need to be very careful that innovation is done in a way that is sustainable both economically and environmentally.
Is there a danger that banning bottom trawling here in the UK doesn't stop demand? I mean, you talked about this earlier. I know it just pushes it off to someone else. So we'd be importing fish from places with far worse practices and pretend it's progress, adding air freight, putting a far greater carbon footprint, and it could still be trawled.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there is no hiding from the fact that the efficiency of trawling cannot be matched by other methods at the moment. As you say, if the demand for fish is still there, then we have two scenarios. Either you have less fish, but the price becomes prohibitive for a lot of people, or you need to import fish from other countries where the fisheries management might be worse, where they might still be trolled, where data on stock assessment might not be as good as the one that we have here. So yes, I mean, as I said before, it's a bit hypocritical to do that, because you end up virtue signaling in your own country, but then outsourcing your problem to someone else.
I tend to feel, Elena, that with us importing so much and exporting so much, do you feel that the shore-based part of the industry, the market, and that they should take some of the responsibility as well, and we eat more of our own fish?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good point, and it's a bit of a deviation from my normal way of living. I mean, in my country, we eat fish much more than than here, and there is a maybe much more direct chain between catching and eating. So yes, I mean, I think a lot is down to what the retailers want, really, what they choose to buy and what they don't choose to buy. So it's not only the onshore side, meaning processing factories and so on and so forth, but it's a lot about retailers. So it would be good if they would value the what is caught in this country, that for sure.
What do you see as the biggest consequences, both of banning trawling and MPAs and not banning it? What's at stake either way?
Well, I mean, if I think for a moment about this, the first concept that comes to my mind is the concept of trade-offs. Both way there will be effects, and effects can be good or bad. The key is to find a balance between socioeconomic and social impact and nature conservation and recovery. In reality, is really looking into sustainability as is intended with all the three pillars: the socioeconomic, the social, and the environmental one. And remembers that the users of the sea, in this case fishermen, are part of that system that we try to safeguard. We need to be careful of stay away and not reaching points of non-return in both world, both in the socio-economic and social, and in the natural and environmental. We don't want to move into a space where fishermen become extinct because they're dying of a thousand cuts. We also want to be careful that the environment is not too much affected, and we cannot forget that the displacement of the fleet might actually create more impact and benefits. So we need to be careful on what we do and how the dynamics around the movement of the fleet will reflect these closures.
What would a ban on trawling mean for coastal communities and livelihoods?
Well, I mean, there is a risk that the impact on the catching sector will transmit into the coastal community that the very same catching sector has helped to build and shape. There are obvious consequences. I mean, we think about the number of fishermen, the number of vessels, and then we go down in degree of separation out of it, and we look at the ice plants and the processing factors. But what sometimes we tend to forget is that everything down the line is going to be affected. Some of communities are so much depending on the incomes of the fishermen that live in the area that even retailers are going to be impacted by this. Even services, even an hairdresser might be impacted down the line by the lack of earnings from the catching sector. I mean, there are cases around the world where you see that if the fishing community dies, then the whole community dies. And we cannot forget that fishing is also highly attractive in terms of tourism. So if we shut down fishing, then even that kind of things goes down. So there are a lot of consideration that needs to be looked at.
That question reminds me always when I was younger, and I'm from a small fishing village called Helmsdale. It's never had more than 1,000 people population, and there's never been more than maybe 10 whitefish boats there. And I can remember as a kid, my mother saying that the local butcher told her that he always knew when the boats had a good week because he could see it in his takings.
Exactly. Everything is connected. And in the coastal community of an island, because basically this is an island, fishing has contributed to shape up even the culture of the areas, and it's so important that it shouldn't be left to die.
What does just transition mean to you, and how should it apply to the debate over banning trawling in UK MPAs?
All right. The first time I heard someone talking about just transition was in the context of energy and the need of moving away from fossil fuels and moving into the offshore renewable energy, and the interaction between offshore renewable energy and fisheries. And I can tell you from what I've seen in that context, just seemed to be a bit of a far-fetched term to be used. Since then, I've heard people using just transition in other ways, and usually it's a frame. The term transition is used in a very instrumental way from people that want to bring a concept and a line of reasoning towards what they want, really. See, I'm not a fan of fluffy definitions that can be used for different purposes, and to fit different narrative. If we're talking about a transition, so we need to define what's the starting point of this transition. Let's define a baseline. Let's assess a baseline and measure where are we starting from. Then we have to identify the endpoint, assess that, and then find a clear path to go from point A and point B. And the only way of having a just transition is by bringing anyone that has a stake in the process in the room to talk about it. Just transition can only happen in this context if fishermen are at the table where the decisions are taken, and if they will be allowed to help to shape the path of this process. If I remember properly, the core principle of just transition are fairness, economic equity, social protection, and environmental sustainability, I think. We can all agree, though, that usually is only the last bullet that it really is focused on.
Please don't think I'm laughing at you, but I had a smile to myself when you said about not liking fluff or fluffy. And I thought,
Yes, I don't.
from talking with you, I would say you're the kind of person you don't come across many people coming to you and saying, "What do you mean? I don't understand what you mean."
I hope not.
Quite right. Quite right. That's the way to be yourself and make sure they know what side of the fence you're on.
Maybe it's the Italian side of me that comes out here, Jim.
Well, it's good. I like it. It's refreshing.
I hope so.
Is there any real common ground between the fishing industry and NGOs campaigning to ban trawling? And if so, how could it be used to find a practical way forward?
To be honest, Jim, I think you should ask them this question. From my experience in these 10 years, the fishing industry has been compromising for a long time, and it still is open to compromise, and has changed and has adapted, has traded off stuff in the talks around the MPAs and more generic conservation. The fishing industry has always been the most pragmatic part in the dialogue. So the question is for them, where is the pragmatism on their side? The problem is that being moderate and pragmatic in this point doesn't really pay their bills, I'm afraid. And I was in a meeting not long ago, and I was talking to some of the representative of the NGOs, and it was just after the moving, and I was very upset about it. So I asked them the question, do you really believe that we should ban bottom trawling? And they were a bit vague, and so I tried to push them a bit, and I says, well, at this point, we feel like we are a bit in a war. So I don't need a neutral position. I don't need. What I need for you is to understand: are you our friend or are you our enemy? Because this is how I feel in this moment. There is not much gray in my line of work in this moment.
Well, Elena, I would have to say I have asked them. I've had some people from the NGOs on and asked them the same question and said that they feel they do talk with the fishing industry, and also one of them in particular saw it as the problems are more political than actually fishing or environmentalists.
I don't know, Jim. I think that there is a difference in talking to the fishermen and listening to the fishermen. Are they really listening on what we have to say? Are they really willing to understand what we have to say?
That's a very good point, and certainly something I definitely agree needs to be asked. Policy is increasingly shaped by public pressure. How do we ensure that science stays at the heart of the conversation?
Well, this is such a good question, isn't it? I think that science is progressively losing its place at the table. I think there is a growing gap between scientific fora and society. And the problem, if I try to analyze it in my mind, is double folded. Firstly, there is this problem, the fact that we all live in a society which moves quite fast. I said that before. We are used to fast reading, fast and short listening. Instagram Reels is long enough to form an opinion, and then we move from that. Artificial intelligence is summarizing concepts for us, and we don't need to put the work in anything anymore, really. Science doesn't fit this profile. Science is about putting the word, it's about applying, and is a painful process at time that doesn't really fit this way of this way of living that we have now. And then there is the second fold, which is quite worrying to see that often supposedly scientific publication make it through the potentially through the peer review process, and then they get published, and then we realize that they actually cannot stand more rigorous screening. But then we go back to the point that we said before: once they are out, they are out. and they become true, and people believe that they are true despite the fact they are wildly discredited. So why this is happening? We can only guess, but sometimes I fear the fact that a lot of people that are undergoing science study in this moment find themselves exposed to biased scientists. Conservationists that call themselves scientists, they have an agenda, they have the power to shape minds that then in the future will work for the government, they will make policy, they will be working for advisory body, and which are supposed to provide unbiased evidence. And I say that not because I'm a conspiracy theorist, but because I've seen it happening here and there. And more than once, I offered my services to try and talk to people and trying to not to make them change their minds. It's not that I want to do, but is to talk to them, to explain to them what I know, and see if that knowledge that I might bring to the table is the same that they have. And if it isn't, then let's ask the right question and analyze why there is this discrepancy in understanding.
Good. Yeah. Who's really shaping the public narrative on ocean protection? Is it the scientists, the NGOs, the media, or high-profile figures like Attenborough?
Well, I mean, we can only hope that science has still something to do with it. But we do see more and more influence coming from a society that is led and influenced by NGOs. Personality, public figures, they bring their own weight in steering the minds of the people. And the worrying thing, as I said before, is that they do not take the time to listen to all the voices before they back one or another campaign. They just go on board and they lack this take a step back, stop a moment, think of what you're going to say and the weight that you might carry into the society. We all of us, we need to get deeper in concept. We need to ask more questions. We need to ask questions on ugly things of which we might not like the answers. And we need to challenge our own beliefs at each and every step of the way. But it's only some of us that I would say have the guts to do so. So my question here is, do we really believe that banning bottom trawling and maybe even stop fishing altogether might be the answer to save the world, as David Attenborough wants us to believe? Are we really sure that the alternative to fishing in terms of food production would come with less environmental costs? We need to stop this virtue signaling and get into real conversations. Ugly conversations, maybe, but much more real that we're doing now.
I said one of the interviews, any fisherman I've spoken to or any farmer, I'll not just tell you about how he's digging the soil or trawling the seabed. He'll tell you anything you want to know about the wilds and bird life around them.
So I'd say that this is not new at all. If you look back at the history of natural sciences, hunters were the first one to observe the birds. They were the first one to look at their habits and where they were moving and what they were eating. And they are the people that brought to us the knowledge at the beginning when nothing was known really. I remember looking into books where these beautiful drawings of birds and nature, they were made by hunters and gatherers, people that were moving around to interact and exploit nature, but by doing so, they were gaining knowledge about it.
I totally accept that. I can remember when I was younger, my father was a fisherman. So many of different signs they would see what birds were doing, and that would tell them something about the time of year, what season we were in, and what they took out of that. They got a huge amount of information out of watching birds.
Absolutely.
And I was fascinated to learn that that is still the case. I was talking to one of the Shetland pelagic trawlers, one of the most, you could say, one of the most sophisticated fishing boats in our fleet. And he was down the west coast watching what whales were doing. He was thinking of, it was mackerel that was in his mind, but he was watching what whales were doing. I thought it was fantastic.
It is fantastic. It is a proof of this deep connection that fishermen have with nature, and how they manage to register signals that might be secondary for us. I mean, they understand the dynamics, they understand the mechanics of it.
Yeah, I was talking last week to a really good friend of mine well, he's not from here, but he was landing in Scrabster. I was up talking with him. I go back a long time. When they started catching squid in the Murray Firth, which is east of us, up north here, he was about the first. He pretty much was, he found them, and he was just saying, when that was the case and it was just the start of it, he says, we were getting good fishing. He says there were minke whales round us, porpoises, dolphins. He went on about all the wildlife, lots of bird life. And he says now it's the whole area is covered with wind farms. And you won't see a minke whale or porpoise. You see none of that. There's seals round the wind turbines, and you'll be very lucky if you'll see a squid.
Well, there is so much that we don't know about it, and there is so much that is understudied, under research ongoing on trying to understand the potential impact of offshore wind farms. That's another level of worry, I would say.
And another thing, going back to what I was saying earlier about coming from a small fishing village, it's got one of the best salmon rivers in the country. And a concern in fishing communities now is, with high profile documentaries like this on trawling, it's almost like history repeating itself when the same high profile people were talking about the ban on culling seals. And the way they look at it now, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but it's what they see. He says, what do we do? What do we see now when we look at our estuaries? They're full of seals and there's no salmon. And the same guy out in the Murray Firth there, he's saying all the sea is wind farms and no. So you can understand why they're seeing things.
And then, I mean, instead, in the map that was shown in the movie, the only disturbance at sea was fishing. There was no mention of oil and gas. There was no mention of offshore wind. There was no mention on military activity or whatever is happening under the water. The only thing that was portrayed and attacked was fishing.
Well, that's funny. It was one of the things that he also said was, when you think of the damage, when you think what the offshore, the wind turbines have done to the seabed with all the drilling and concrete that they've put in.
I mean, there is a increasing recognition in the scientific fora that offshore wind, if the projection on the numbers of turbine that it's at the moment in the papers will actually happen, they will modify completely the look and the composition of the habitats in the North Sea. So yeah, I mean, let's keep focusing on bottom trawling and ignore completely what's happening around us.
Trawling and food security. Can we feed a growing population without bottom trawling?
Trawling is an extremely efficient way of fishing. Yeah, I mean, there are issues that we need to work on, and about selectivity and so on and so forth. I mean, we can always make it better, but at the moment, I don't see any other method that can feed the world with such efficiency. there are other methods that can be used alongside it. I mean, I don't say that should be the only method used, should be a part of a differentiation of fishing methods, but none of them is free from impacts. Each fishing method, but also each food production system isn't free from impacting. There is an impact in cropping, there is an impact in farming, there is an impact in aquaculture, and so on and so forth. So we are going back to the idea that we need to accept that we are a species living on a planet. And I would add that we actually match a couple of descriptors for an invasive species, but I'll not go to the details of that. And we are bound to have an impact. But no, if we look into feeding the world, then all these things, they have to work together. We cannot start removing one and favoring another, because the impact might be even worse.
And it's a very low carbon footprint.
It is, and it is if we keep it where it is in this moment. If we start moving it about, and so you have two ways you can increase your carbon footprint here. It's by displacement of trawling, because the same method being to having to move somewhere else, and maybe it moves in a space where there is an offshore wind farms, and so he has to move away and he has to find another ground that is actually suitable for the kind of fishing he's doing. Or you can switch to other methods, but those are the methods, they have not the same efficiency. They will have to spend more time at sea, hence will have potentially a higher carbon footprint. So, I mean, there is a narrative in skipping a bit and understanding what we are dealing with and the risk that we are incurring in pushing this narrative on banning bottom trawling.
And I know that many of the trawling skippers that I speak to, they're absolutely convinced that a much more damaging form of fishing is the gill net and long lines that their EU boats are fishing round them. And they're one point they really feel annoyed about is the fact that they're in their trawls, they're taking in disused nets and long lines that are ghost fishing, and they feel it's done far more damage to the environment than trawling is.
I think there is merit in understanding the various impacts and understanding that each and every method will have one. If we imagine a world where we are all shifting into static gears, then the problem of entanglement of seabirds and cetaceans and so on and so forth is going to be a bigger problem. The ghost fishing is going to be a bigger problem. So, as I say, we need to have a place where there is differentiation. There are different methods that can fish in different areas. Bottom trawling will be fishing where bottom trawling can fish. Another method will be fishing where bottom trawling can't. But it's not about. See, I don't get on board with this narrative of destructing fishing. In my opinion, there are places where a method is compatible and can happen, and there are places where a fishing method can't. It's not that a fishing method is de facto destructive. It depends on where you're doing it, how much, and how you're operating your fishing method.
Yeah. I asked AI to pick a question for this series, a challenge to Attenborough. If you had 5 minutes face to face with Sir David, what would you say?
Well, see, Jim, I really hate AI. I hate how we look for shortcuts, and anytime we can't find one of them, we just invent one. So it makes us lazy and incapable of reasoning on a subject. But anyway, enough with AI. So 5 minutes with David. Well, it might be entertaining, I would say, but I would ask him actually to come and visit us and talk to us extensively. There is nothing I can tell him in 5 minutes, and this is, I mean, in line with what I've been telling you in this past hour. I don't believe in fast things. I believe in complexity. I believe in deep thinking and reasoning. So I would just tell him, come to us and talk to us and try to understand and really listen to us and understand our points. That's how I would use my 5 minutes with him.
It's very good. Which book or article do you think everyone in fisheries should read?
Oh, allow me to be a bit philosophical here. I think it should be The Old Man and the Sea, because Hemingway, I mean, it says a lot of the relationship between a fisherman and the sea, a fisherman and his prey. It says a lot about the dangers of the seas and the injustice, and it's a bit a book for the soul, but it give a lot of depth to the concept of fishing, in my opinion. But if you want to be more practical, I would say to people, read everything comes near you. Read everything that allows you to answer questions and to raise even more questions. Read what is complex, not what is easy. Read enough to be able to tell the difference between probable, because we have to remember that nothing in science is sure. We talk about probability all the time, but we need to tell the difference between what's probable and what's far-fetched. And this comes only with an application and of critical thinking, and read everything comes to your uh, vicinity, let's say.
When you say reading everything, it's reminding me just one day earlier this week, I have a calendar, we desk calendar, and there's a quote on it each day. And I was just pulling it off, and it said, if you read a lot, you'll live 1,000 lives. If you don't, you'll live one.
Totally agree with that.
Good, good. One word to describe the future of British fisheries.
Challenging. It will be challenging, but in saying that, it doesn't mean that we'll do whatever is in our power to protect it and to get our points across.
Have you a feeling of optimism?
My boss always tell me that I am a warrior, so I'm not exactly one that indulge optimism. I am more a realist in that kind of sense.
Okay.
It's not that I don't hope. I do hope
Yeah.
that there is there is a way forward, and I am totally motivated in finding it. But often it feels quite hard.
Well, I think I often feel it's an industry that's seen a lot of different people come and go, and it's still there. So
I do
no,
hope. I do hope that's the case. I really believe that it should be there.
yeah. Where can our listeners follow you online, Elena?
I'm not much of a social media voice, Jim. I'm sorry. I have a LinkedIn profile, but I mean, if anyone want to get in touch with me, my contact is on the Scottish Fisheries Federation website. They can reach out to me whenever they want.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's fine. Well, thank you, Elena. I'm very pleased with that. I definitely feel it's so refreshing having talked to somebody that you're very clear and definite about what you believe in, and good on you for being that way. It comes across.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.